Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make hard techno in the style of MRD. In particular, we're going to be talking about a style track like Superwoman. It's a very popular track. I love this track, and there's some really interesting stuff going on, so I wanted to break down how to make a track in the style for yourself. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available. And yeah, let's dive in. So the first thing up here is the percussion, and it starts with these rolls. So right off the bat, we have those classic, 90s, 2000s, ravey style rolls. Very mid-rangey. And this is one of those things, you kind of just have to use a loop for it, because you hear, there's a certain life that you get with, a live loop like this. That, we just couldn't program that. So that's the first thing there. Then we have this hi-hat. And yes, this is our main hi-hat that's on the upbeats. You can see there's also this layer to it. But this is that main one that's just punching through the mix. And it's not the biggest, long 909 hi-hat or anything. It's just a short little But that's all we need for this groove. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't always just want the big, fat, long 909 hi-hat. Something tighter and shorter like this can actually work really well and still have, the same amount of energy. Then we have this moving percussion. So what's happening here is you can hear it's playing every other 16th note. And what's happening here is we have some white noise going into a bandpass filter with a pretty high resonance, and then we're using erosion on that, and that's what's kind of creating that tone. And then to give it some movement, all you have to do is just put an LFO on the filter cutoff, and then the key here is not using too much, you just want a little bit. And then that's just gonna kind of give this a more lively feel. And this adds a lot to the background of the track. If we turn that off, there's definitely something kind of missing. Then we have the second hi-hat, which you can hear just adds a little bit more fullness to that main hi-hat. And the last one here is just this one. And that's just 16th notes. Then on the group of all those, we just have a little bit of saturation and then this EQ boosting the high end. The drum bus isn't on. So you can see, just a little bit of saturation, not too much. We don't want these to get too crunchy, but a little bit is going to go a long way when you already have really solid sounds. And then on this EQ, you can see we're just boosting the highs just to bring that out a little bit more. Make it a little bit sharper sounding. You really want this percussion to be nice and bright like that for this style. And yeah, then we have our kick. So yeah, pretty standard fare here. You can hear it's just a nice, fat, punchy techno kick. Don't really even need to do any saturation or anything like that. It's already just a solid kick. And then we're just letting it shine in the mix. You notice, it's the loudest thing. So it's yeah, we really don't need any saturation because it's already really full sounding. It's got the right amount of low end, it's got the right amount of punch. And all we have to do is just turn it up. Then we have the bass synth. So this is the kind of scale you want to use. It's just this very dark sounding thing. In the original track, I believe it was it was a more close together progression like that. But then here I just kind of played around with some different scales because I wanted to show you that you don't always just have to do the same thing as the reference. If you're trying to make something in the style of Superwoman, you don't have to just do exactly the same thing where it's gonna go. you can kind of get a little bit more creative with it. So that's what we did here. And the key to this is it's like this same pattern. That half note length pattern. But then we're just playing that across all of the different notes here. So you just get this like really repetitive and kind of intense groove here. And the way the sound is made is it's using 2 layers of wavetables. So we have our first one, which you can hear is most of the sound. And then our second one, which just kind of adds some extra stuff on top. So for the main one, yeah, it's a saw wave, and then a square wave, which has a bit of pulse width. Turned up, you can see. Then we have a low pass filter, which is on the MS2 setting. And then we're using this amp envelope to shape the filter. So something to keep in mind here is you just want a really, really tight envelope. Like, this is the thing I spent a lot of time on with this track. And that's also something that's, you know, if you have a track like this, that's really simple. A lot of times, you're not spending so much time on, like, you know, making 20 different melodies. But then you're going to spend that same amount of time just dialing in, like, the filter envelope, you know? So that's kind of where it comes in with a more minimal track like this. But yeah, so I have that. And then it's just kind of doing that. But then on top of that, we also have, you can see this note here. So essentially what this is doing is it's key tracking. So the higher notes, the filter is more open. And that's of course very useful when we're jumping across octaves like this, because it's going to make this a much more dynamic pattern. If I turn that off, like I said, it's not quite as dynamic. And then the last thing on here is we just have a bit of unison. It's the shimmer mode. And yeah, and then on the second layer, so it's just one saw wave with no unison. It's pretty much the same sound. You can see, you know, it's that punchy filter envelope. But then on this one, we have a phaser and OTT. So here's without those. Phaser. Oh, the OTT. So it just kind of creates this nice, really crunchy layer that's going to sit on top of this really well. And just really fill out the sound. Plus it helps when you have like a big unison bass like this, to have a layer that doesn't have any unison. So that's another thing about that. It's like kind of like fills that out. Again, just the main one. And then with that layer. It's obviously a lot fatter. Then after that, on both of those at the same time, we have a bit of a, we actually have another phaser. So here's without that. And with it, just gives everything a little bit more character and texture. I have this EQ8 here, which is just kind of shaping this a bit. You know, we're boosting the mids, boosting the highs, cutting out at 100 hertz. And that's just kind of shaping things going into this drum bus here. Because essentially, like, you know, the way drum bus or any saturation works is it's however loud the signal is that you're putting into it, that is how much saturation you're going to get. And also you can see we're using the compressor here, so it's kind of the same thing. So by boosting these frequencies, we can make just those ranges get more saturated. And it's going to make it a lot more juicy and just better sounding. Here's without this. And then with it. So yeah, then we have the drum bus. Like I said, we got a bit of drive on that. And I also have the compression to kind of flatten the sound out a little bit. You know, make it more even so that it's not like da-da-na-na-na-na, like super loud on one note and then super quiet on another. Especially with that key tracking. And then we just have a compressor, which is side chaining into the cake. And then the final thing here is just the utility, which is converting the bass to mono so that it's not going to mess up the low end in the track, because this is still the main bass in the track. So you need to make sure that pretty much like most of your low end is going to be in mono, especially when we're using all that unison. You can hear without this utility, the bass is a lot messier. And yeah, that is it for the bass. And then on the group of the low end, we don't actually have any processing that you're hearing most of the time, but there is this little high pass filter at the end. Yeah, just kind of transition it, makes it like ease up for a second, and then we're right back with the full energy. And then after that we have this lead. So what this is doing is it's playing the notes from the bass pattern. If you notice, this lines up with what's happening there. And the way that I made this is actually just by taking these top notes from the bass line. And then you can see I just took out some of them, because there should be a note here, there should be a note here. Like all those, I took out. So then this just plays really nicely off of that. But the idea here is like, we're not gonna just have like a crazy like lead that's playing its own melody. We're not gonna have like do-no-no or like something like that. We want to have a lead that's gonna fit in with what's already happening. So essentially, all you have to do is just have something that's playing on the same notes as the bass, but it's playing something different. So that was the idea there. And then what I've done here is actually have this pitch here. So this is turning everything up +3. So this is actually hearing. You can hear it's creating this kind of like dissonant chord, like very evil sounding with the bass. And it's just because these are all +3 up from what the bass is playing. And the sound with this one is made pretty similar to the bass, honestly. You can see the saw wave with a square wave with some pulse width on it. I have a low pass filter, that same envelope. I'm pretty sure it's even key tracked. Yeah, it is. And then we have that phaser. So the phaser is really good. You can see like just for creating like interesting textures on your sound. We have a bit of drum bus as well, and then finally just a compressor to sidechain this to the cake. And that's it for the lead. Again, it's just adding to what the bass is doing. Then we have the clap snare, which is very simple. It's just 2 layers. So we have our clap, a nice punchy, hard-hitting clap like this, and then we have our snare. And you can hear when we put them together, we get the punch of the clap with the body of the snare, and it's a really full and hard-hitting sound, and it's going to sit really well with the kick. Because the way I think about it is like with a track like this, you really want that kick and the snare to kind of be even in terms of punch. And you can hear that it is. And we just got that going to a bit of drum bus. You just makes it hit a bit more. And it also glues these together to make them sound like one snare. And the last thing down here are these Atmos, which sound like this. So these are just some different effects that I've made. And they come in every 4 bars just to give something a little bit fresh in the background. Yeah, it's super subtle, and then they're just going through some echo and a high pass filter. But it just adds a little bit more flow to the track. If we just have like just the main elements, just the bass line and the drums going over and over and over, it gets really monotonous. This for like 5 or 6 minutes wouldn't really work. But then when you have something like this that just comes in every 4 bars, yeah, it's just gonna make it feel a bit more lively. And yeah, just kind of bring the track to life like that. And yeah, so that is gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available at the top of the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. And yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.